I don't talk about this often. It's one of those things that settles deep, you know? Like a stone in the pit of your stomach that you just learn to live with. My name's Marlo, and for the longest time, I truly believed that if you gave your all, if you were loyal, you'd be safe. Shielded, somehow, by your own integrity. But when the ground fell out from under me, it wasn't some big, dramatic explosion. It was quiet, deceptively so, like watching yourself get slowly erased, line by line, while everyone else just carries on. If you've ever poured your heart and soul into something, only to have it casually discarded by the very people you trusted, then maybe you'll understand this. Because they thought I was just finished. Vanished. But they didn't know about the foundation I'd already built, stone by patient stone. They didn't know I wasn't done. It was a Tuesday, I think. One of those Seattle mornings where the sky is the color of a worry you can't quite name. I was standing in a small, impersonal meeting room at Finch Dynamics, not even my own office, which felt like the first little nudge off balance. Alastair Finch, our CEO, stood by the window, looking out at the hazy outline of the Olympic Mountains. He didn't turn around when he started speaking. His voice was smooth, like polished river stones. Impersonal. Marlo, he began, and the way he said my name, flat and final, told me everything before he even got to the words. We're restructuring. Your role is being made redundant. Redundant. Such a sterile word for gutting 4 years of your life. I'd poured everything into that company. Late nights, sacrificed weekends, that one Christmas I missed because we were in the middle of a critical product launch. I'd earned my stripes. Division Leader of the Year, top performer. I could almost feel the phantom weight of those awards in my hands. They were probably still on my desk, catching the weak morning light. You have until the end of the day to clear out your personal effects, Alastair continued, finally turning. His designer suit looked impeccable, not a single crease. He had this way of looking at you, like you were a slightly disappointing line item on a balance sheet. And then I saw her. Chloe, my cousin, leaning against the doorframe, a little smirk playing on her lips. She was wearing this ridiculously bright pink dress, like a cheerful wound in the gray room. Chloe, who'd barely scraped through a semester of community college, who'd bounced from one half-baked passion project to another, always funded by someone else. And now here she was. Apparently, Beatrice Finch, Alastair's wife and Chloe's newest, most influential benefactor, had decided Chloe's next project was my career. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It wasn't a sigh of resignation. Not yet. More like my body trying to make space for what my mind couldn't quite process. The air in the room felt suddenly thick, hard to draw in. Of course, I managed. My voice sounded surprisingly steady, even to me. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my employee badge, number 304, and placed it on the polished mahogany table between us. It made a small, sharp clink. Security protocol, I understand. Chloe pushed herself off the doorframe. Such a shame, Marlo, she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that felt like acid. You were always so dedicated. She practically purred the last word. The triumph in her eyes was so blatant, it was almost artless. I gave a small, polite nod. The kind you give to a stranger who bumps into you on the street. Inside, though? Oh, man, it felt like 1,000 tiny paper cuts. Each one a memory. A late-night brainstorming session that sparked a breakthrough. A quiet word of encouragement to a struggling team member. The sheer pride I'd felt when our division hit its targets. All of it apparently redundant. Alastair, I said, keeping my gaze level with his. Before I go, you might want to take a closer look at your lease agreement. Specifically, Section 9, Subclause B. Alastair's brow furrowed, just a fraction. The lease? Chloe will be handling those operational details now, as part of her expanded role." He waved a dismissive hand, but I saw it, a flicker of something. Not concern, not yet. Maybe just mild irritation at this unexpected loose end. Chloe just beamed, lapping up the mention of her expanded role. I picked up my badge again, its plastic cool against my palm. "Right," I said. "Well, your new vice president of strategic repositioning might find that particular clause illuminating. It details the terms for immediate lease termination, especially in situations involving, say, unethical governance or wrongful dismissal due to nepotism." Silence. For a beat, the only sound was the faint hum of the HVAC system. Alistair's composure didn't crack, but his eyes sharpened. Chloe's smile wavered, just a tiny bit, like a reflection on disturbed water. I didn't wait for a response. There was nothing more to say in that room. I turned and walked out, leaving the silence to curdle behind me. As I walked down the hallway, past faces that quickly shifted from curiosity to awkward avoidance, I didn't feel shame. I didn't even feel the full weight of the anger yet. What I felt, strangely, was a sliver of something else. Something cold and clear, like the air after a storm. They thought they were just firing an employee, an inconvenience to be swept aside. What they didn't know, what no one at Finch Dynamics knew, was that I wasn't just Marlowe, the Sunto former VP. I was their landlord. The drive home was a blur. The city lights smeared through the drizzle on my windshield. I remember parking the car in my driveway, just sitting there for a long time, the engine ticking cool. The cardboard box with my few personal items, a couple of books, a framed photo, my now useless awards, sat on the passenger seat. It felt pathetically small to represent 4 years. My apartment felt quiet. Too quiet. I dropped the box by the door and walked over to the window. Seattle sprawled out below, lights twinkling defiantly against the encroaching darkness. It was usually a view that comforted me. Tonight it just felt distant. I thought about my grandmother, Augusta. She was the one who'd always understood the real currents beneath the surface of things. She'd grown up during the Depression, watched her own family lose almost everything. "Marlowe, dear," she used to tell me, her voice raspy but firm, like old, weathered wood. "People will always build flashy things up high. Towers of glass and steel. But the real power? The real power is in owning the ground they stand on. Don't ever forget that." Back then, I'd thought it was just quaint, old-fashioned wisdom. Something you'd hear in an old movie. But when she passed, she left me a modest inheritance. I was just 21, still in college. Most of my friends were dreaming of backpacking through Europe or landing internships at flashy tech startups. But Augusta's words, they echoed. So, instead of blowing it on travel or a new car, I started learning. I buried myself in books on property law, urban development, zoning regulations. I spent evenings at the university library, poring over city maps, highlighting undervalued commercial lots. My classmates thought I was nuts. Commercial real estate, Marlowe? Seriously? It's so boring. Maybe it was. But Augusta's stories weren't boring. She'd tell me how her father, my great-grandfather, had quietly bought up small parcels of land in downtown Seattle when everyone else was panicking, selling for pennies on the dollar. He held on to them, and slowly, surely, the tide turned. By the time I was 24, I'd used every penny of that inheritance and a small, carefully managed loan to establish Augusta Holdings, named for her, of course. And Augusta Holdings owned 3 commercial properties. One of them was the building at 700 Pike Street. A handsome, slightly aging Art Deco structure that, after a significant renovation I'd overseen, became the gleaming headquarters of Finch Dynamics. I remember the day Alastair Finch, so confident and expansive, signed the lease. He'd been impressed by the renovations, the prime location. He probably saw me as just some young, eager property manager, happy to have a prestigious tenant like Finch Dynamics. He had no idea he was signing a lease with the quiet girl who just aced her advanced contract law class, the granddaughter of Augusta, who knew that words on paper, carefully chosen, could be more powerful than any boardroom. I walked over my bookshelf and pulled down a thick, leather-bound binder. Augusta Holdings, Finch Dynamics Lease. I ran my finger over the embossed title. Inside, nestled among the dense legalese, was Section 9, Subclause B. I drafted it myself, with the help of Ms. Diaz, an old friend of Augusta's, now a razor-sharp attorney in her late 60s. Immediate lease termination. I read aloud to the empty room, my voice barely a whisper. Shall be triggered upon documented evidence of unethical corporate governance, including but not limited to wrongful dismissal demonstrably motivated by nepotism, discrimination, or the deliberate defamation of an employee by senior management or their proxies. Ms. Diaz had raised an eyebrow when she first read it. Marlowe, this is unorthodox and aggressive. Are you sure about this? A clause like this, it's a sleeping giant. You have to promise me you'll only ever wake it if it's a matter of true justice. I promise, Ms. Diaz, I'd said, only for justice. And looking back at Chloe's smug face, at Alastair's casual dismissal, I knew that time had come. The dull ache of betrayal was starting to sharpen now, morphing into something else. A cold, clear resolve. They hadn't just fired me. They'd underestimated me. And they'd broken the terms of our agreement. The next few days were still. I moved through them in a kind of focused quiet. The shock had worn off, replaced by a steady, almost unnerving calm. I didn't rage. I didn't weep, not really. Instead, I gathered. It wasn't hard. The signs had been there for months, if I'm honest. Chloe's arrival at Finch Dynamics had been heralded with a surprising amount of fanfare for someone with zero relevant experience. Beatrice Finch, Alastair's wife, had paraded her around like a prize pony. Chloe has such a fresh perspective. Beatrice would gush at company events, her voice a little too loud. Just what this old place needs. Fresh perspective, apparently, meant disrupting established workflows, undermining experienced colleagues, and spending an inordinate amount of time networking, which mostly involved long lunches with Beatrice and her social circle. I'd heard the whispers. Team members frustrated by Chloe's incompetence, her habit of taking credit for others' work, her casual disregard for deadlines. I'd tried to address it professionally. I'd spoken to Alastair, presented data on project delays, on team morale dipping in departments Chloe graced with her presence. He'd listened with that same polite detachment, then said something about mentoring new talent and the importance of diverse viewpoints. Translation: Beatrice wants this, so it's happening. The worst part was the family angle. Chloe was my aunt's daughter. My parents, they'd always had a soft spot for Chloe. Or maybe it was just easier to give in to her. I remembered years ago how they'd borrowed from my college fund, money Augusta had painstakingly saved, to bail Chloe out of some self-inflicted financial mess. Then there was the car they bought her after she totaled her own, driving recklessly. Whenever I'd tried to set boundaries, to push back against Chloe's entitlement, I was the one labeled difficult, unsupportive, selfish. She's family, Marlowe, my mother would say, her voice laced with that familiar guilt-tripping tone. Family helps each other. Even when helping meant enabling, or in this case, standing by while Chloe actively worked to undermine me. I started a new file on my laptop. Finch Dynamics, breach of contract evidence. Internal memos from Alistair, praising Chloe's strategic insights on projects she'd barely touched. I'd been BCC'd on a few by a sympathetic junior analyst. Printouts of emails, forwarded anonymously from Beatrice to HR, instructing them to manage any formal complaints about Chloe's conduct. Then there were the harder-to-prove things, the rumors. Whispers that I was difficult to work with, that I was resistant to change. One particularly nasty one, which I later found out Chloe herself had started, insinuated I'd been inappropriately flirting with a major client to secure a deal. It was all designed to build a case, to justify my eventual removal. Each piece of evidence was like a small, sharp stone, painful to hold, but necessary. I meticulously documented everything, cross-referencing dates, times, individuals involved. The binder grew thicker. My resolve solidified. This wasn't just about losing a job anymore. This was about dignity. It was about Augusta's legacy. It was about the promise I'd made to Ms. Diaz. The evening before I planned to act, I called Ms. Diaz. I laid out the evidence, calmly, factually. She listened without interruption, the occasional the only sound on her end. When I finished, there was a pause. Then, "Marlo," she said, her voice grave. "The evidence is compelling and heartbreaking, given the family connection. Section 9, subclause B is clear. You are well within your rights. The notice of breach needs to go out tonight then," I said, giving them the stipulated 24 hours. "I'll draft it immediately," she confirmed. "It will be delivered electronically to Alistair Finch and Finch Dynamics registered legal counsel by 9 p.m. The clock starts then." "Thank you, Ms. Diaz." "Take care, Marlo," she said, a rare warmth in her voice. "Augusta would be very proud of your fortitude." Fortitude. I clung to that word. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet living room, the city lights a distant, indifferent sparkle. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt heavy, like I was about to set a very large, very complex machine in motion, and I had to be absolutely certain every gear was perfectly aligned. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The rain had started again, a soft, persistent drumming against the window panes. It felt fitting. Augusta always said storms cleared the air. I made myself a cup of strong coffee and sat down at my desk in my home office, my real command center. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled not with corporate trophies, but with legal texts, binders of property deeds, zoning maps. A single, cherished photo of Augusta, her eyes crinkling at the corners with that knowing smile, hung above my monitor. First, the email to all Finch Dynamics staff. I kept it brief, professional. Subject: urgent. Temporary remote work directive. Body: good morning, team. Please be advised that due to unforeseen operational issues, the Finch Dynamics headquarters at 700 Pike Street will be inaccessible starting at 9 a.m. today. All employees are to work remotely until further notice. Your direct managers will be in touch with specific instructions. Login credentials for remote access remain unchanged. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. Marlo Sterling, Augusta Holdings LLC. I paused, rereading that last line. Marlo Sterling, Augusta Holdings LLC. Not just Marlo, the discarded VP. Marlo Sterling, the owner of the ground beneath their feet. I hit send. Next, the press release. I drafted it with Ms. Diaz the night before. Headline: Augusta Holdings terminates lease with Finch Dynamics, citing breach of contract. The body detailed the invocation of Section 9, Subclause B, citing documented violations of ethical corporate governance, including wrongful dismissal and nepotism. It stated that building access would be suspended at 9 a.m. and that Ms. Diaz was the legal contact for Augusta Holdings. I attached a carefully redacted summary of the evidence, enough to make the point, not enough to invite a messy public lawsuit over individual privacies. I set it to auto-distribute to major Seattle business journals and news outlets at exactly 9:05 a.m., just after the doors would be officially sealed. Then, a secure memo to Westgard Security, the firm that managed 700 Pike Street. Effective 900 hours today, all access codes for Finch Dynamics tenancy are to be deactivated. Full lockdown protocols for their lease floors are to be engaged. No entry will be permitted. Please ensure all entry points remain sealed. Notify local authorities of a commercial tenant eviction in progress, as per the attached legal notice. Augusta Holdings will have representatives on site to liaise if necessary. Send. I leaned back in my chair. The rain was coming down harder now, a steady, cleansing roar. My phone buzzed. A text message. My mother. Marlo, honey. Alistair Finch just called Dad in a panic. Something about being locked out? What on earth are you doing? Chloe is beside herself. She's your cousin. She needs this job. You need to fix this. I stared at the message, the words blurring slightly. She needs this job. Not. Are you okay, Marlo? Not. What happened? Just Chloe. Always Chloe. My finger hovered over the reply button. I could have typed out 100 angry, hurt responses. But what was the point? They wouldn't understand. They'd never understood. Support, I thought, is a two-way street. Or it should be. I placed the phone face down on the desk. Today, all I felt was a profound, almost serene clarity. There was nothing to fix, only something to reclaim. One final email. The official eviction notice, stamped with Ms. Diaz's digital signature, scheduled to be delivered to Alistair Finch, Beatrice Finch, Chloe, and Finch Dynamics legal team at precisely 9 a.m. Concise. Airtight. Final. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the rain wash over the city. Soon, Alistair Finch and his cohort would understand that I never needed a corner office to wield real power. Augusta had taught me that. And today, they were about to learn that lesson firsthand. I parked my car, a nondescript gray sedan, directly across the street from 700 Pike Street at exactly 8:30 a.m. I had a travel mug of hot coffee in the cup holder, my laptop bag on the passenger seat. The morning drizzle was still coming down, glazing the windshield, making the familiar lines of the building look slightly distorted, like a memory you can't quite trust. I took a slow sip of coffee, the warmth spreading through me, and set a mental timer. I wanted to watch. Not out of malice, exactly. More out of a need to witness the gears I'd set in motion actually turn. At 8:35, the first few Finch Dynamics employees started to arrive. A young woman in a bright yellow raincoat hurried across the street, fumbling for her badge. I watched as she swiped it at the turnstile. Nothing. She frowned, swiped it again more firmly. Still nothing. She looked around, confused, then pulled out her phone. A couple more people joined her, a small knot of bewilderment forming by the locked glass doors. Murmurs, too faint for me to hear, but I could imagine the dawning frustration. I took another sip of coffee. By 8:40, the group had grown. Maybe 10 or 15 people, huddled under umbrellas, all on their phones. I saw one man in a sharp suit try a side entrance, only to be met by a uniformed Westgard security guard who gestured him away, holding up a laminated sheet of paper. The guard's radio crackled. He looked calm, professional. He was just following orders. My orders. 8:45. Right on cue, Alistair Finch's gleaming black German SUV pulled up to the curb, followed closely by Chloe's conspicuously new, bright blue electric sports car, No doubt another gift from Beatrice. Alistair practically vaulted out, already barking into his phone, his expression thunderous. Chloe emerged looking flustered, her usually perfect hair already damp from the rain. Beatrice was in Alistair's car. I could see her silhouette, gesticulating wildly. They hadn't even reached the door yet, and the panic was palpable. The clock on my dashboard ticked closer to 9. I opened my laptop, logged into the secure portal Ms. Diaz had set up, and refreshed the building's internal security feed, the one I, as the owner, had access to. The turnstiles remained stubbornly still. Cameras showed empty lobbies, silent hallways. Guards were politely but firmly directing anyone who approached the entrances to leave the premises. It was a perfectly executed, silent coup. At precisely 9 a.m., my phone vibrated twice. 2 notifications, almost simultaneous. The first, email, urgent. Temporary remote work directive, successfully delivered to all Finch Dynamics recipients. The second, press release. Augusta Holdings terminates lease with Finch Dynamics, successfully distributed to media outlets. I tapped the link on the second notification. Already, headlines were starting to ping. Finch Dynamics locked out of Seattle HQ amidst lease dispute. Augusta Holdings cites ethical breaches in shock eviction of tech firm. Allegations of nepotism surface as Finch Dynamics faces abrupt displacement. Each headline felt like a small, distant clap of thunder. Alistair was now at the main entrance, visibly yelling at the security guard, waving a piece of paper, probably the breach notice Ms. Diaz had sent last night. His expensive coat was getting soaked. Chloe stood beside him, her face pale, her usual smirk entirely gone. She kept trying her own badge at the reader, a repetitive, desperate click, click, click that I could almost hear even from across the street. She exchanged a frantic, wide-eyed look with Alistair. Beatrice finally emerged from the SUV, umbrella held aloft by a harried-looking assistant, her expression one of pure, unadulterated outrage. I watched them. The rain was a curtain between us, streaking down my windshield, but my view of their unraveling was perfectly clear. I reached into my bag, pulled out the thick binder labeled Finch Dynamics, breach of contract evidence, and flipped it open to the tabbed section for Section 9, Subclause B. I traced the words with my finger. Immediate lease termination, unethical corporate governance, wrongful dismissal demonstrably motivated by nepotism. The weight of all those meticulously gathered pages, all those late nights cross-referencing emails and witness statements, felt solid and real in my lap. Augusta's wisdom, my quiet, relentless preparation had all led to this precise moment. My phone buzzed again. A quick call from Ms. Diaz. Marlowe. Security confirms full lockdown is effective. Press release is live and already making waves. All notices formally served. Well done. Her voice was crisp, efficient. Thank you, Ms. Diaz, I said, my own voice quiet. Thank you for everything. Alistair let out a shout of pure frustration that was so loud, I heard it faintly even through the closed car window and the drumming rain. This is outrageous. Illegal. Contracts, Alistair, I thought, are very, very legal, especially when you breach them. The lobby beyond the glass doors was completely deserted now. Desks, chairs, even the expensive orchids Beatrice insisted on having delivered fresh every Monday, all sitting abandoned in the silent, locked-down space. I took a deep breath, the damp Seattle air tinged with the metallic scent of rain and something that tasted remarkably like vindication. I started the car. The headlights cut through the gray mist, and I drove away, leaving them to the storm they had created. Each mile took me further from their shocked, betrayed faces and closer to home, to my real office, where the next chapter was already waiting. I decided not to go straight home. Instead, I circled the block and parked a little way down the street, out of direct sight of the main entrance, but close enough. I needed to do one more thing. It wasn't in the plan, not exactly, but it felt necessary. Foreclosure. About 20 minutes later, I saw Alistair, Beatrice, and Chloe emerge from a heated huddle with a frazzled-looking lawyer who'd clearly been summoned in a hurry. They looked defeated, drenched, and utterly furious. Alistair was still clutching the eviction notice Ms. Diaz had served electronically that morning, now limp and rain-spotted. I got out of my car, umbrella clicking open, and walked towards them.
Calmly.
Alistair saw me first. His eyes, already bloodshot, widened, then narrowed into slits of pure rage. "You," he roared, pointing a trembling finger. "Marlo Sterling. Reyes Holdings, no. Augusta Holdings. This is preposterous. You can't just..." I stopped a few feet away, meeting his fury with a quiet steadiness I didn't know I possessed until that moment. I held up the thick binder of evidence. "Actually, Alistair, I said, my voice even, carrying clearly over the rain. Section 9, Subclause B of the lease agreement you signed. Perhaps your legal counsel can explain it to you again. Wrongful dismissal demonstrably motivated by nepotism. Unethical corporate governance. These actions trigger immediate lease termination." I opened the binder to a pre-marked page, a copy of an email chain where he explicitly directed HR to create a performance improvement plan for me after he'd already offered Chloe my role. "I have documentation, Alistair. Lots of it." Chloe stepped forward, her face a mask of disbelief. You? You own this building?" she stammered, gesturing vaguely at the silent edifice behind her. "I do," I confirmed, my gaze shifting to her. "Augusta Holdings does. And yes, Chloe, I have the emails from Beatrice to HR, instructing them to ignore formal complaints about your performance. I have recordings of the false rumors you personally spread to discredit me with clients and colleagues. It's all in here." I patted the binder. Beatrice, usually so composed, looked like she might shatter. Her perfectly applied lipstick was smudged, her expensive silk blouse clinging to her uncomfortably. How could you?" she whispered, her voice tight with outrage. "How could I?" I let a small silence hang in the air. Perhaps the better question is, how could you? You built your careers, your reputation, within these walls. Walls that stood on ground owned by someone you so casually, so cruelly, tried to erase. I looked at each of them in turn. Alistair, sputtering incoherently. Beatrice, rigid with fury. Chloe finally looked small, almost scared.
"Good.
As per the notice, you have 24 hours from 9 a.m. this morning to vacate the premises completely. Every desk, every computer, every paperclip. Anything left behind after 9 a.m. tomorrow will be considered abandoned property and will be disposed of by Augusta Holdings." My voice was firm, leaving no room for negotiation. This wasn't a discussion, it was a statement of fact. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. It might have even been genuine. "Marlo, please," she began, her voice cracking. "We're family. You always said family first, remember? That old, manipulative line. It used to work. Not anymore." I met her gaze, and for the first time, I didn't feel a shred of guilt, only a profound sense of release. "Family first, Chloe." I agreed, my voice softening just a fraction, but not with pity, with certainty, which is why I'm protecting mine. Augusta Holdings, my grandmother's legacy, and my own future. A gust of wind whipped the rain around us. In that moment, I saw it flicker across Alistair's face, the dawning, Sickening realization that titles and connections and bluster meant absolutely nothing without the ground beneath your feet. I gave a small, final nod. Then, I turned, my umbrella shielding me from the worst of the storm, and walked back to my car. The sound of their shocked, angry voices faded behind me, swallowed by the rain. As I drove away, for real this time, I knew the true final move wasn't the eviction or the press release, or even this confrontation. The true final move had been made years ago, in a quiet university library, with Augusta's wisdom echoing in my heart, when I decided to own the ground. 6 months later, well, things look a little different. Augusta Holdings is thriving. We recently acquired a new property downtown, a beautiful historic building we're renovating for mixed-use development. The press, when they occasionally rehash the Finch dynamic story, tend to call Augusta Holdings a phoenix rising from the ashes of corporate betrayal, or something equally dramatic. I just call it good business, and justice served quietly. I don't check Chloe's social media anymore. Last I heard, through the family grapevine, she was trying to launch some kind of lifestyle blog about overcoming adversity. I wish her well, I suppose. From a very great distance. Alastair Finch, his name has faded from the industry news. He lost a lot of credibility, and Finch Dynamics, after a chaotic relocation and several lawsuits from disgruntled investors, is a shadow of its former self, struggling in a cramped suburban office park. Beatrice, I'm told, is focusing on her charity work. She sent me a single, terse email a few weeks after the eviction. No apology. The subject line just read, regret. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. My new office, well, Augusta Holdings' new office, is bright, filled with sunlight that streams through large, clean windows. My team is small, dedicated, and genuinely kind. There's a warmth here, a sense of shared purpose that was always missing at Finch Dynamics. The framed photo of my grandmother, Augusta, sits on my desk. Her smile, that knowing, gentle strength, still guides me. Am I angry anymore? Honestly, no. The anger burned itself out, leaving behind something cleaner, stronger. Freedom, maybe. And a deep, quiet confidence in my own resilience. The past doesn't haunt me. It taught me. It showed me what I was capable of. And if it ever tries to knock on my door again, it won't find a victim. It'll find a woman who didn't just survive. It'll find a woman who rebuilt her own foundation, stronger than ever. And this time, the whole damn block has my name on it. My real name. If this story hit close to home for you, if you've ever had to find your own strength in the face of betrayal, I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. Drop a comment below. I do try to read them all. It helps knowing we're not alone in these things. And if you found something in my story that resonated, maybe consider subscribing for more. We all have stories of quiet battles and hard-won peace. And if you feel moved to support the channel through super thanks, thank you. Sometimes giving back, even in small ways, is part of the healing too.
Take care.